Anna Hedgeman, born in Iowa. She was born July 5th, 1899. Very interesting. So that puts her in the same birth year, memory serves me correctly, Paul Rosa. She makes transition January 17th, 1990. So she lives virtually the 20th century. Now her father's, your mother and father, they're in Minnesota. They moved very quickly from Iowa. When she's tiny, they moved to a place called Anoka, Minnesota. Not too far from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Virtually all white, except for a scattering of black people. Her father from South Carolina. Her father went to Clark, like what is now Clark Atlanta University. So, and he believed in education. They were devout Christians. He made a life for them there. His mother, her mother, and as a young girl, that community is so small in Minnesota. And anybody who is Minnesotan, I got some very good dear friends and colleagues now and there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, Minnesota. All that whole upper Midwest, Mississippi Valley. That's where they had Dred and Harriet Scott imprisoned at Fort Snelling, right there before you get to the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. That's right. That's also where they had Little Crow and the Lakota, the Sioux. That was the biggest death warrant in American history. Lincoln signed a death warrant and they hung 38 Lakota up there. It's a book called 38 Nooses that talks about that during the Civil War. You know what I'm saying? So all that means, so Dred and Harriet Scott imprisoned in the same fort where they had the Lakota, all this white violence. That the grandchildren of those white folk came to Washington D.C. to see if they could start it up again. But I mean, this is the ideological, and it's the Upper Mississippi. So that's that river that's coming all the way down to Louisiana. So there's a black culture in Minnesota that is deeply rooted there, and it comes from all the places people came to Minnesota from. Mississippi. One of the most powerful women, one of the most powerful people I know I will ever meet is a sister I'm very close to. She's buried there in St. Paul, in the Rondo neighborhood. She grew up in Nzinga Radabisha Heru, who was the president of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations for 20 years. I mean, brilliant tactician, just an important figure. Another figure we don't talk about. Nzinga's father, Clyde Parker. In fact, her birth name, that she changed her African name, her birth name was Claudine. You know how black folk do. Oh, she came out a girl? Don't matter. I'm still gonna give you my name. So Claudine Parker. Her daddy. No, I'm sorry. She was a twin. It's Clyde and Claudine. Her father was A.B. Parker. Actually, Clyde, she named for somebody else in the family, but again, a male name. A.B. short for nothing. A.B. Black folks, you had them initial names, right? Ossie Davis tells that story. He said, when I was delivered, the white doctor thought my name is supposed to be R.C. The doctor thought my mama said, my name's supposed to be R.C. R.C. That was my name. The doctor heard R.C. and wrote O-S-S-I-E. That's how my name turned into Ossie Davis. Black folks used to give people initials. Sometimes you just have, it's just your initials. A.B. from Mississippi. He said, I'm moving my family as far as I can without leaving the United States. And that's how they ended up in Minnesota. Because any farther north, you in Canada. So we ain't going to Canada, but I'm getting as far as I can away from the South and stay in the United States. Anyway, so this Minnesota culture is deep. They celebrate Juneteenth. They drink red soda. It's a lot of Texans transplanted in Minnesota. So it's this mentality. So anyway, Anna Hedgeman's father came from South Carolina all the way over to Iowa. Then they go, and of course, Iowa, that's the birthplace of some of Nicole Hannah-Jones' ancestors. How did y'all end up? I got a huge book called Outside In over there, The History of Blacks in Iowa. So they all come in, So anyway, Anna Hedgeman's father, now she's surrounded by white people with this handful of black people. She comes of age in a community where she's taught black pride. Her father's teaching black history, her mother's teaching black history, but she's not taught that blackness is somehow something that needs to be policed. So she doesn't have a sense in her mind that there are any restrictions. So one time, for example, her mother takes she and her sisters to St. Paul for a social with some other black children because they don't really know, and they're teenagers now. And the father gets mad when they come back. It's like, where y'all been? Oh, we just went. Yeah, I don't know. You know, we strict Christians. I don't want these girls. Anna's now a teenager. I don't want them mingling with these boys. One of the boys there is a young man named Roy Wilkins, who grew up in St. Paul, who brought his cousin. And see, now hold on now. I don't want our girls over there getting any idea. I mean, they strict Christians, right? So when it comes time to go to college, Anna Hedgeman's father is friends. Anna Arnold, before she marries her husband. Anna Arnold's father is friends with the president of Hamline College, now Hamline University in St. Paul. So he gets Anna a scholarship. Anna Arnold becomes the first black to graduate from Hamline, now Hamline University. And Hamline honors her. There's an Anna Arnold scholarship. They got an Anna Arnold lecture. It's very important. Anna Arnold lecture. While she's there, as a 20-year-old, Hamline invites a distinguished Negro scholar, celebrity to come, and leader to come and talk about his experiences. He has just come back from the first Pan-African Congress. This is 1919. The war has just ended. Anna Hedgeman, 20 years old, sitting up here looking at this guy. It's W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois starts talking about Africa, and I just came back from the first Pan-African Congress, and let me tell you, Africa's on the rise. This is 1919. You know what I'm saying? So she's sitting there, coming from a household where Black history was taught, but now she's meeting Du Bois, she's talking with him, she's like, and at that moment, I was like, Africa. My father always talked about it, my mother always talked about it, but this is different. This is the possibility. Now we fast forward 100 years to us now. She knew more about Africa in 1919 than most of us know about Africa today. This is 100 years ago, and she's 20 years old. You know what I'm saying? This is not black. They know black studies classes. This ain't no HBCU. This is in the middle of Minnesota. Du Bois shows up, and anyway, I'm gonna speed this up because this is her first book, The Trumpet Sounds. A memoir of Negro leadership by Anna Arnold Hedgeman. And you see she's got the Declaration of Independence on the cover, right? And Anna Arnold Hedgeman publishes this book in 1964. Remember, she makes transition in 1990. So she's gonna follow this book up about halfway between when she wrote this book and when she made transition. She publishes another one I'm gonna come to. But everything I'm telling you now is the story of this book up until 1964. And then in 1977, 13 years later, and 13 years before she makes transition, she publishes this, The Gift of Chaos, Decades of American Discontent. By now, of course, she is in her late 70s. And what she talks about in here, she condenses to the first chapter of this, and then she picks up and finishes the conversation. And she still got 13 years. So now what happens? Now I'm gonna go very quickly about this. She graduates from Hamline College. The president likes her. She's a top student. Everything's cool. And she wants to teach because, you know, now she's realizing I'm a woman of African descent. I'm a black woman, Negro woman, colored woman, you want to say at the time. Say, I really can't teach around here. Now I'm realizing this racism thing. So the president says, you know what? We want you to be of greatest service. Her fathers and their mothers like, yeah, we agree. So we're gonna send you south. This is her first trip south ever. She goes to teach. She joins the faculty at Rust College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. The birthplace, the home of the sister over your right shoulder, Ida B. Wells. Now she ain't never been south. You know what I'm saying? Now this is where it gets crazy. I'm saying, well, it's already started, as you can see, crazy, right? She's at Rust College. She's on the faculty, and she says, I am now teaching the children of these black people who come from the soil, whose people came through slavery, who, you know, and then, you know, this is, she says, I really am in love with these people. I'm working, and this black lady came up to me. She came up, she said, and she unrolled this cloth, and she had just these coins, and she just kept putting these coins in my hand, small coins. She said the whole pile didn't amount to about maybe $2. And she said, I want you to take this and get us to the president because I want this money to go to educate one of our children. This is the only reason. She said, be careful, because everything I'm giving you, I made from washing, I made from working, and I want this to go for the education of our children. I mean, so you can see what they're pouring into Anna. This is why later on, when she's critiquing Adam Clayton Powell, when she's telling Martin Luther King and them, where are the women on this? What about Daisy Bates? What about Rosa Parks? When she's talking to Malcolm X, like, I understand you in the nation, I'm a Christian, but we can all join this labor movement right here. This is she said, I'm not throwing anybody away. You understand? Because she said, you understand, I was in midst, this lady put this money in my hand. She trusted me to take, the guy she's working for at Rust, James Farmer Sr. James Farmer Sr., of course, father of James Farmer, director of Carr. James Farmer's the one, of course, Forrest Whitaker played in The Great Debaters, the Nate Parker, when Nate Parker was the debater. This is the same James Farmer. We do what we have to do so we can do what we want to do. This is she's working for him at Rust College. It is unbelievable. While she's there, she starts to understand the importance of how instruction is going to help our race develop. Then she finishes that job after a year. And then she says, okay, what I'm going to do now? She says, then they offer a job in Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, at the YWCA, the colored YWCA. And that starts her career with the colored YWCA. She gets to Ohio and she's like, okay, now what are we going to do here? We got to focus on healthcare, jobs. Jobs first. She said, these people ain't got no job. So the Y then, the colored Y is the biggest thing going. YWCA, YMCA. The colored YMCA is where Carr G. Woodson started the Association for Study of Negro Life and History at Wabash Avenue in Chicago. Conrad Worrell, my great gentleman who just made transition. His father, Walter, came from LA to start Pasadena, to work, to run the colored Y in Chicago. That's where Woodson stayed. That's where people, the YWCA is extremely important. I mean, you new in town, that's where you go. I need a place to sleep. I'm looking for a job. So she's coming in as part of leadership of that little Y. And then she gets there and she realizes these are the problems we're working our way through. And then she says, I was ready for more. I realized that, I like Ohio. I love working in the Black community. I'm beginning to understand the nature of economics and how that ties to education and how that all ties to why we don't have better standards in terms of healthcare. Because she's not working from the bird's eye view. She's literally in the trenches, And so then she says, I got this degree. I got some experience. And then the call comes, we got an opening on the East Coast in the Y. Okay? Wait, Jersey City. She ain't never been nowhere near. She gets to East Coast and then she gets to Jersey City, which is eventually then going to transfer to 137th Street, the Black YWCA there. She falls in love with the East Coast, falls in love with New York City, says. Now she from that little bitty town in Minnesota to work in the South. She gets to New York and is like, this is where I was supposed to be all along. The Harlem Y, that's when she gets invited to the media conference. By then, 33. Now she's there. Now here's what's interesting. Along the way, and I don't want to give it away, I encourage people, get this book, because Anna Hedgeman, if we paused at any moment and we started going through the people she knew, I mentioned James Farmer, J. Leonard Farmer as he was known, who was the dean there at Rust. But if we went through piece by piece, you wouldn't believe the people that she's interacting with. So she's let's just fast forward, we'll skip Jersey for a second, go to Harlem. She's in leadership at the Harlem YWCA. So anybody Black who has any notoriety comes through the Y system, and she's in charge, in part, of building education systems. So Carter G. Woodson's in town. Dr. Woodson, could you come talk to these young ladies? So she's scheduling Carter G. Woodson. And she said, I'm sitting here talking to Woodson about Negro history. This is Anna Hedgeman. She's got Woodson come. Du Bois comes through, no problem. Langston Hughes comes, no problem. Everybody. Schomburg is alive across the street. So anybody know New York, the Schomburg sits on the corner of Lenox or Malcolm X and 137. You go in, that's where the Y is. So the Negro division is right there. Anna Hedgeman is in deep conversation with all these people. Willis Huggins, you just name it. The Garvey movement is still going on. So there are so many other people we could talk about. Channing Tobias, Edmund Haynes, we could go on. But so after a couple of years there, she then takes a position in Philly. What's going on in Philly? Well, we go to the Catherine Street Y in Philly, the Black Y there. Okay. Now, here's the thing, having lived in Philly for 17 years, if you're not from Philly, you may not know this, but Catherine Street, that's South Philly. Around the corner from that wide, that's where Marian Anderson grew up. I mean, she's in the neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? Anna Hedgeman, and she gets there and she says, we got to work on these jobs. Crystal Bird Fawcett, of the Fawcett's, Arthur Bird Fawcett, Jesse Fawcett. Crystal Bird Fawcett was the first Black woman elected to the Pennsylvania State Legislature, is the boss at the colored Y over the border. So Anna Hedgeman is coming in, working with Crystal Fawcett. I'm like, every page in this, you see someone who is one of the few Black people, man or woman, to have a college degree, who has been on the HBCU faculty at this point, who has worked at and is working at one of the most important institutions in the Black community, and not working in a position of senior leadership as much as working from the ground up, trying to figure out the needs of Black people, all the skills of a scholar, of a social scientist, of a social worker, of a teacher, all this in the body of this one woman who's in her mid-30s right now, who is also coming of age during this incredible moment of political transformation. So she's invited to the Armenia conference, and she shows up. Ralph Bunche is there, E. Franklin Frazier is there, Du Bois is there, all these Black people are there. Mary Church Terrell, who is connected very deeply to the Y movement as well, she's interfacing with her, and she's considered the next generation. Okay, youngsters, we got, at the same time, these dudes like E. Franklin Frazier and Ralph Bunche, they pushing on Du Bois and them, they call them the elders. And so this whole notion of intergenerational, she's in the younger generation, but she ain't no child anymore. So you see her really being able to hear both sides, and that's a skill she developed throughout her life. So anyway, I'll keep going very quickly. 1934, she comes back to New York. She resigns position, she comes back to New York. She becomes a consultant on racial problems in the LaGuardia administration. There ain't no Black people. That's it. So now I'm gonna be a consultant on racial problems. I mean, all right, so, and then she takes a job at the Central Y in Brooklyn. Oh my God, this is where it gets very interesting, because remember now, she's a devout Christian, so she's working with church women as well. She gets to Brooklyn and she's also advising the city government, and she's saying, you know, the big problem we have here is jobs. This is an issue. She's deeply rooted in this notion of employment. She said, you got racial discrimination, you don't have a living wage, and she's got the ear of the mayor of New York's, you know, while she's anchored, because she says, I never want to leave. She said, every position I've had has been in the Black community. I never want to leave that. I don't ever, and she writes about this, I never want to get so far from my community that I don't know what the community is doing. She said, I'm not comfortable in those senior leadership positions, because she said, and oh man, every page, she's also very critical. And it's one thing to write about Adam Clayton Powell as an academic. It's another thing to be somebody that says, yeah, I was around Adam Clayton Powell. He did some very important things, but he really wasn't tied to the community as such. And let me tell you, and she writes about how she said, I'm not coming for him. I'm just saying, yes, nationally, yes, legislation's been, but let me tell you from the position of somebody who's down here with these women right here working, ain't getting no wage. These ladies cleaning up, ain't got no union. Let me tell you what could have been done. I mean, so it's brilliant to see, and I'm not saying Scanlon does a great job, but no, I want to see what Anna Hedgeman is the one. And I just keep thinking about that lady unrolling that cloth and giving her that change when she was a young girl down there in Mississippi. I mean, she never leaves. Yes, I got it. So here's what's interesting about this now. It gets very interesting. She is asked, because she also knows folks in the Roosevelt administration, including Eleanor Roosevelt, you know, will you join this civilian defense piece? Because we gearing up for this war. She says, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Now it's in the early 40s. She joins the civilian defense in New York. She writes about having to intervene because Black volunteers don't want to work in the Red Cross. Why? They throwing Black blood away. Huh? Yeah, they won't transfuse Negro blood. They don't want Black blood. Black people give blood, they toss it. She said, let me investigate this. She finds out, they say to her at the Red Cross, oh yeah, no, we don't do that anymore. Now she doesn't mention this, but I know this, of course, and you know this, the Black person who was the major figure in the American Red Cross, of course, was Charles Richard Drew. Charlie Drew, the surgeon. Charlie Drew, the professor of surgery at Howard. Charlie Drew, of course, who famously died, and the urban myth is that he died for a lack of a blood transfusion. That's not true. There's a book called One Blood that kind of walks through what happened. He died from his injuries, in fact. But Charles Drew helped set up the first blood banks. He wrote his graduate thesis. It was called Banked Blood, where he talked about how to remove the plasma and dry the, and be able to send blood out. So as a result of his scholarship, he helped set up blood banks in England. And once he did it in England, the Americans is like, well, this is embarrassing. So he comes back to the United States for the Red Cross as a black man. Ironically, interesting, another graduate, another DC, just Washingtonian like Charlie Houston, and a graduate of Dunbar High School. Again, that important Dunbar High School. He comes back and sets it up in New York. Charles Drew resigned the Red Cross over this issue. Y'all segregating blood? Let me tell you, as probably the only person in here qualified to say this, all the blood's the same. Do you understand no such thing as black blood? I mean, so how y'all gonna segregate blood and people? So Anna Hedgeman tells a story in here. She comes into a meeting where she asked this white woman, your son overseas fighting for democracy. He's on the battlefield, he's about to die. You mean to tell me that you would rather him die than get a blood transfusion? She said, a white woman said to her, at least I knew he died for democracy. That's them people who was under the Capitol dome. You choose death. You choose your whiteness over your life. She told Anna Hedgeman, at least I know he died for democracy. I say, you know what? I ain't mad at Anna. No, by the way, anyway, I'll keep going very quickly. So what happens is, she's approached by A. Philip Randolph now. This is around 1943, 1944, because A. Philip Randolph been threatened to march on Washington in 1941. Roosevelt caved to sign Executive Order 8802, desegregating jobs in the military. That's how a lot of our people ended up in Detroit and Cleveland and places like that, LA, Portland, Seattle, going to work in jobs in the factories because they've been retooled. No more cars. We're gonna make tanks and planes and glass and this kind of thing, rubber tires. Akron, that's how LeBron James people, that's how they got to Akron. You people going up there working in those factories. So at any rate, Goodyear, Akron is Goodyear. So Anna Hedgeman is approached by Randolph, who she writes a lot about. And she said, he says, we know about your organizational skills, your ability, your focus on jobs. Would you be open to being the executive director of a permanent fair employment practices committee? Why? Because the federal government sets up this federal fair practices committee in the wake of them calling off the March on Washington. Roosevelt said, man, please don't bring these people. He said, I don't give a damn. Listen, I was around in World War I, and I know what happened when we came back. We ain't going for the same okie doke. So let's be clear, because other thing about Randolph was an open socialist. When J. Edgar Hoover was over the Military Intelligence Division, it becomes the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover referred to A. Philip Randolph as the most dangerous Negro in America. He is an open socialist. Do you understand? Now, he wasn't a communist, but his thing was the public resources must be redistributed. And we got to have fair wages. We got to have protections. He was an open socialist at a time, whether it be the beginning with the Palmer raids and the Red Scare, but Randolph's not scared of us. Why? Because in 1925, with the help of his wife, who ran a string of beauty parlors out of Chicago and had independent resources, Randolph becomes the leader of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Chambermaids, the first black union in this country. And my money don't come from y'all. You understand? My wife got an independent thing. And of course, Hoover and them try to put his wife out of business. She's a communist. She's a red. I don't give a damn about you. Black women gonna get their hair fixed. So anyway, so these are black people you can't control. You understand? Randolph don't give a damn. Him and Chandler Owen, they got a magazine called The Messenger. He writes an article during World War I talking about pan-Germanism among Negroes. In other words, I know y'all mad at Germany, but why are we mad at Germany? Because see, you the racists I see in front. They talking. So when people come up now and talk about, I don't know, this is not your father or your mother's civil rights movement. See, you shouldn't talk about things you don't know about, because you embarrass yourself as you study and realize, are you trill enough to write something like that today and post it? Or are you running somewhere talking about healing and how do we move forward? No, Black Lives Matter. I'm with those young people. And I say that it only deepens your ability to understand how to negotiate power when you go back and say, well, what were the 20 and 30-year-olds doing in 1918? Well, there was one named A. Philip Randolph who was like, I don't know why I'm mad at the Germans. I see you. I want to see how and to back him up, he doesn't just write something and talk something. A half a decade later, he done organized all these black women and men who work on these railroads because they getting beat up. I mean, like we talked about before, that film Charles Dutton and them are in, Mario Van Peebles, 10,000 Black Men Named George. It's a nice kind of mythological gloss on the brotherhood. Andre Broder plays A. Philip Randolph. But you see, Randolph is thinking globally, but he's working to organize. You can't just talk, you got to build something. And it can't just be, let's all meet and protest. No, we need to organize a structure we control. So anyway, Randolph, by the 1940s, Randolph is now middle-aged. See, he approached Anna Hedgeman, who's also in her mid-40s. And actually, he's older than she is. You know, Randolph has been operating now. He's in his mid-60s. He's like, you know what? Will you come? Because I understand Roosevelt, you know, we work, we negotiate, whatever, and he's got a fair employment practice committee, but we want to make that permanent. We need jobs. So will you direct it? She said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. And from the mid-40s through the mid-60s, that next 20-year period, Anna Hedgeman becomes, if not the, I don't know, you don't necessarily rank people the most important. I don't think there's anybody more important in that movement than Anna Arnold Hedgeman, who has virtually disappeared from our conversations. And in page after page, this is the beautiful thing, it's almost like a journal. She walks you through the negotiations. She walks you through, for example, 1948, Truman's running for office. She comes in, they ask her, the Truman campaign, Ms. Hedgeman, will you help raise money among the Negroes for Truman? She says, you're a Democrat. Yeah, people say you can't win. No, but we want to organize. Okay. Now, mind you, this is a very different Democrats and Republicans. Then the Republicans are not considered the open enemy. Not in the same way. Not even close. Because you got liberal Republicans, conservative Republicans, you got lily white Republicans since the Hoover era for sure, white supremacists. But who do you have in the Democrats? Strom Thurmond. It's 1948. It's the same year they come out with that Southern Manifesto. I mean, well, no, Southern Manifesto is 1957, but that's Eisenhower. But they got white racists, the Southern Democrats. Hedgeman is like, eh. So what does she do? She reaches out to the old school black Republicans and Democrats. She talks to William Dawson. Dawson was that black congressman out of Chicago. Because Hedgeman's network, she knows everybody. Hey man, what you think? Dawson is like, look, reason I switched to the Democrats, he walks back through the New Deal stuff, and he says, they're not perfect. They're not even good in a lot of ways, but I think we can cut out a little bit more space to operate with them. So she takes it on. She supports Truman. And of course, we know the famous Dewey defeats Truman. Truman pulls it off. He was saying Hedgeman is in charge of the national campaign for raising funds and resources in the black community. He said, Stacey Abrams, Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Stacey Abrams is incredibly important. Now, I guarantee, I don't know the sister, but I suspect that Stacey Abrams know who Anna Arnold Hedgeman is, because if you look at the playbook, I'm gonna help you, but I'm not your woman. You do understand. Stacey Abrams is like, I'm maintaining a healthy distance between me and the DNC. And I understand, yes, we're all Democrats, but let me be very clear. My commitment is to those people that I told we're gonna organize to do this. I'm looking at Anna Hedgeman like, this is your ancestor right here. And she was trusted with that work. Now here's where it gets interesting as well. 1952, she goes to India. She's now working with the State Department. She's hanging out in India. She's there for 3 months. And like, what is going on in India? Now, mind you, the black relationship with India, Gerald Horne, I don't know if I have Gerald's book. I may not have it somewhere where I could put my hand on it. I tried to put most of Gerald's books here, but I don't see it. There's a book Gerald Horne wrote on African Americans in India with a picture of King laying a wreath at Gandhi's grave with Jawaharlal Nehru. But King knows about Gandhi not because of something he read as an adult. He knows about Gandhi through Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman, because Thurman had gone to India with Mordecai Johnson, the president of Howard, with his wife Sue Bailey Thurman, a generation before. King gets introduced to Gandhi through Mays and Thurman and them when he's a student at Morehouse. So people say, oh, Dr. King read Gandhi. This is black institutions. This is HBCUs. King never met Gandhi. Howard Thurman did. You understand? So now you got an independent India coming up. She's there. She gets there. She's going there for 3 months. She's talking to the women. She's looking at the parallels. She writes in here and she says, as I was there, I was thinking about the black colleges. I was thinking about Tuskegee. And I said, they could use trade development here and skills, because who is she in conversation with? She's in conversation. She doesn't call them the Dalits here. She calls them what they normally call the untouchables. So I'm here with the black people. Let me go find the black people. She's hanging out and she writes about this meeting where, the Indian leadership, how do we know our people? And then one of the Dalits is like, you talk to us. You come to the village. And she's writing like, India needs a lot of help. She says, and there's some things that they could learn from the Negro. And I'm seeing parallels between. So she's got this internationalist framework. It's fascinating. So what happens? She comes back to the United States, 1952. There's a guy running for mayor of New York named Wagner. Right? Mayor Wagner. He isn't Mayor Wagner yet. He wants Anna Hedgeman to come help him. Anna Hedgeman, I'll help you. He wins. Now, the rumor being floated that she's being floated as a possible cabinet post in his administration. So finally, she calls the mayor's office and say, look, my name out here in the streets. Y'all got something for me? Well, come down and meet. So she comes to meet with the mayor. The mayor offers her 3 different jobs. In the same meeting, she turns down each of the jobs. One is like a deputy cabinet position with the police. She said, there's already a Negro in that position and he's doing a fine job, I heard. Oh yeah. Well, what about this job? Well, there's a Negro there. You want to switch out a Negro for a Negro? Is it like a Negro affairs? What about one of them cabinet posts where a Negro has never been appointed? And so finally, Wagner says, well, what job do you want? She said, I want to be appointed as one of your advisors, senior advisors. He said, it's not a precedent for that. No problem. That's what I want. Anna Arnold Hedgeman becomes the first woman and the first black to be appointed and a senior advisor to the mayor of New York City. You know what I'm saying? I mean, how did this woman disappear from history? I'm like, she is not, anyway. So we're not even to the thing, right? She works there for several years. 1958, she worked for the city. This cat named S.B. Fuller had a cosmetics company because she's working on economic policy. And what she writes about this, she says, I realize ain't but so much you can do in a government. Now our people say, well, government, they're all the same, it all doesn't work. No, you're saying that from outside. Here's somebody that's gonna walk you through what government can do and what it can't do. And she's doing it from the experience of having worked in just about any kind of formation you want to talk about. Anna Hedgeman has experience. When you be out there protesting, okay, she did that. We need our own institution. Yeah, she did that. Okay, we got to educate. Yeah, she did that. We did what we got to. You see, back in the day when Du Bois, I knew Du Bois. Careful. Wait, no, what were you about to say? No, all this kind of thing. She gets to the city. She's there for years. She says, I can do certain things and certain things we can't do with government. This guy gives a talk. She goes to help. Again, it's about jobs. She's trying to push economics. So Fuller gives a talk, and she says, this guy Fuller, in this talk to these black people about economic power and the importance of it, he pulls a $100 bill out and puts it on the podium and says, any one of you can earn this money right here if you had the opportunity and the right structure. And the $100 bill in 1958, like, damn, did it come off a roll? Boom, any of y'all can. So she looks at it and says, yeah, that's true. They talking afterward. Fuller offers her a job. What do you want me to do? Well, we want you to be a person to deal with public relations and deal with improving our image in the community and helping us understand better ways to use our resources. She said, yeah, I'm kind of tired of working with the city. So she resigns from the city of New York. She ain't never been afraid about a job and takes this job with Fuller and the cosmetic company. She says about a little over a year later, Fuller buys a black newspaper, the New York Age, one of the oldest black newspapers in the country. Du Bois, when he was like 15, 16 years old, was a correspondent to the New York Age, writing from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. T. Thomas Fortune was the editor of the New York Age. And Anna Arnold Hedgeman becomes your colleague, Professor Hunter. And she joins the New York Age as an associate editor and writes a column, a weekly column in the New York Age, then gets a radio show. Yes, I was like, how did this woman fall out of history? She got a radio show.
What?
One Woman's Opinion. That was the name of her show and her column. I mean, I'm telling you, it's like, this cannot be a real person for us not to have like t-shirts and banners and institutes. How did Anna Arnold Hedgeman? So anyway, One Woman's, she does that for a couple of years. She's an associate editor to the New York Age, one of the most prestigious newspapers there is. And she's writing a weekly column. She's editing the paper, and she's got a radio show in New York City. I'm saying, wow, this sounds like Karen Hunter. I mean, it's like, what else is she gonna do? Now, we haven't even gotten I'm gonna speed this up. I'm gonna spend too much time because I want people to trust me. Everything we talking about right now. People say, well, what else is there to do? No. This is just a tease. You got to read it. I done skipped over everything. All these are just the highlights because I didn't even talk about anyway. She then, in 1960, she decides to leave that job. I'm gonna leave the job. And after she leaves the job, about a week later, she gets an invitation. And what ends up happening in 1960? She goes to Ghana to deliver a keynote address at the first conference of African women and women of the African diaspora. She goes there representing the Negroes of America and Black women to give a talk with all these women from around Africa and the African diaspora. The conference, of course, is put on by the government of Ghana. So who does she meet, listen to, talk with? Kwame Nkrumah. And she said, she's talking, and then she says, this Africa I've been learning about since I was a child. I realized then, this is really where it's at. I'm an American, I'm here, I understand it, I love my people, we gotta fight here, but I understand, I always knew, I've been to India, but this Africa and these Black women, she's having these conversations with Black women from all over the world, but they're Africans, and then the diaspora. Oh, and she also meets Patrice Lumumba, which means when she comes back to the United States, remember the United States government is gonna have a role with Belgium and the UN in undermining and eventually overthrowing and then killing Patrice Lumumba. And she writes about how this is ridiculous, this is absurd. And she says, there are a couple of things I regret. There are resolutions passed at that conference. And I should have voted to link the struggles in South Africa and the struggles in the United States, because that's what they wanted to do in the resolution. But as an American, I wasn't yet sure. But in retrospect, I should have absolutely said those struggles are the same struggles. She meets Patrice Lumumba shortly before he's offed by these CIA operatives. A guy wrote a book called Chief of Station Congo, who was working for the CIA. And of course, we know now they said they're going to return the physical remains of Patrice Lumumba from Belgium to Congo. And if you don't know the story of how they killed Patrice Lumumba, you think, oh, are they going to return his body? There's no body to return. They chopped him up and boiled his whole body in a barrel of acid and dissolved him. And the only thing that's left of Patrice Lumumba are a couple of teeth that one of these crackers who was a soldier took as a souvenir, and that's what they're returning to Congo, the physical remains. Anyway, I won't even get into that because the guy who replaced him, their operative, Joseph Mobutu, was there for decades, Mobutu Sese Seko, and every time he came to the United States, he was entertained by Dick Cheney, and his favorite senator was, what's that senile dude out of Utah that left now? Mitt Romney took his seat. Orrin Hatch. These were his buddies. Patrice Lumumba. So anyway, so Anna Hedgeman. So let me wind this up. She comes back. She takes a job as a consultant. This is her thing. She can always pick up some money. And her husband was a classic European trained singer. So they could, they make a little money on the side, and they called it a declaration of independence. They said, we would never do anything for the money. They did that when they got married. So they got this thing. We basically living from paycheck to paycheck. So, but she ain't scared to walk away from a job. She starts she got a little consultancy going. She takes a contract with the American Missionary Association when she comes back from Africa. And they tell her, could you go through and tour our schools, our HBCUs, to see what's going on there and see how they can be improved? She said, yeah, that'll be my job. She goes and does a national tour through the South of the AMA HBCUs. The AMA schools include Laura Spelman, Rockefeller, Henry Morehouse, who was the first president of the AMA. These are the AMA, Clinton B. Fisk. I mean, the AMA school said she's touring these. And then when she does that, she says, I saw what they need. I saw we need more buildings. We need better curriculum. We got to think about the Negro. And then she said, but since I'm touring schools, let me go tour these white schools. So then Hedgeman said, I'm going to compare the white. I know y'all sent me for the black schools, but I think in order to get a real sense of what these black schools need, I need to go to those white schools too. So she's not gonna come, when you hear her talk about education, I've toured, I've surveyed, because she's a social scientist really in that sense. She's always gonna have survey research backing her, and she knows how to write, and she knows how to listen to people, and she's never left the people. So she does that work. Now you have A. Philip Randolph comes back to her a couple of years later while she's working and says, will you join this committee on social and economic progress in New York? She said, yeah. What you trying to do? Well, we're working with the unions, District 1199, this kind of thing, because by now the Brothers of Sleeping Car Porters has merged into the AFL-CIO. Randolph is a major leader in American labor. He's the black guy. He wants Hedgeman, come on now, we don't work. He said, okay, I'll help you. I'll help you here in the city, because she loved New York. She's back in New York. He says, we'll go on strike. These nurses not get paid at Harlem Hospital. These black workers, and she's working with blacks and Puerto Ricans too. Because she came out of Brooklyn. That's when she first found out about the Puerto Ricans, and so she writes in here about black, Puerto Rican, African American, Puerto Rican unity, and then she talks to the Jewish community. Said, "What's going on over here?" So I'm thinking Crown Heights. I'm like, this woman did all this work dealing with these questions. So anyway, she comes back. She says yes, and her job is to get all the various factions together. She says, I'm dealing with the communists, I'm dealing with the black elected officials, Hoolan Jack and them, I'm dealing with, eventually she's gonna bring in this next generation. She writes about it here, for example, and then I met this young lawyer named Percy Sutton. I mean, this is the thing. This is one born in 1899. You understand? All of this, and I'm thinking, wow. So she says, so I went and talked to this young charismatic minister with the nation named Malcolm X. And I said, hey man, we need you to join this coalition. She is a devout Christian who never excludes anybody. So Malcolm agrees. The nation joins those protests. And so later on, so then she works with the National Council of Churches, which includes black folk. Benjamin Mays was the leader of this first meeting she had with them. And I asked them, I'm gonna close with this, because she recognizes that she eventually takes a job with the National Council of Churches. She then realizes, in fact, I'm sorry, this one ends, the trumpet sounds, ends with what happens at the end of 1962, after she's rejoined Randolph and they're doing this work, and then the beginning of 1963. What happens? Of course, Randolph says, this is working well in New York. We're working, struggling. We need to take this to DC. You know what? You remember that march we was gonna have? Yeah, 20 years ago? Yeah, let's do it. She said, okay, when you want to do it? I'm thinking October 63. We're going down there for a march for jobs, economic progress. She said, okay. But now, remember she's a devout Christian. She didn't work with the Council of Churches. She didn't work with the AMA. She said, word on the street among the Negro churchmen though is that Martin King is talking about having a job to get this Civil Rights Act passed, a march to have a Civil Rights Act. Randolph said, yeah, well, we could have a march too. She said, hold on. Let me talk to them. Anna Arnold Hedgeman is the one who gets these conversations submitted to put the King March and the Randolph March together. So when we see the March on Washington for Jobs and Justice, it's Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Like, no, bros. She's like Ella Baker and them like this. You dudes, y'all always, okay, you take a one, let me talk to them, okay? Hold on, Phil. Bruh, can we, and I'm a good, you know me from the church. Yeah, okay. No problem. They put the marches together. And then she writes, this is where this book comes in. This book here, Anna Arnold Hedgeman talks to everybody. She talks about how A. Philip Randolph, oh, I'm sorry. Wow, how did I miss this? In between the time she works for the Brooklyn Y and the time that she comes on board with Wagner, they convince her, actually this is after she leaves Wagner administration. They convince her to run for city council. She doesn't win the election. She's the first black and the first woman to run for the president of the New York City Council. This is her second campaign. The first campaign, they asked her to run for Congress. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so she's run for office several times, right? So in this book, though, they asked her when she ran for Congress, they said, why did you run against a white Democrat? Why didn't you run against Adam Clayton Powell? Why did you run? In fact, she was working in the Bronx. She ran out of the Bronx. He said, why don't you run out of Harlem? And this is what she says. She said, and she writes about this. She says, you know, A. Philip Randolph has seniority in Congress. That is more valuable to us than me serving in Congress. Let's pause there and think about this for a minute. Now, she has critiqued Randolph in both these books. He doesn't do enough for the community. You know, it's like grandstanding. I mean, I understand it. But when it comes time, well, you can take him out. Why don't you take him out? It's black on black. She's got the same philosophy she had with Wagner. This ain't about black fighting. This man has seniority. And it was that power. He has the power. Why would I? Is this an ego exercise or something? You know, black women got to get together, or black people hold on. Yeah, I got real problems with a lot of what he's doing.
Adam Clayton Powell.
I got a lot of problems with Powell, but here's what I don't have a problem with. That's seniority. Because while I would like him to do more about jobs here in New York City, do you understand Adam Clayton Powell is the one that gets Pell Grants? Push for. It's more important for us to have Powell so these kids can go to school than it is for me to go run up in there and see if I can flex and get, okay, I'm in. Now you a junior person, you ain't even on the budget committee. I mean, so Hedgeman is not, her life is a brilliant display of how to think about us before any one of us individually. So anyway, the March on Washington, they ask her to work. So she's in senior leadership. She pulls together a women's meeting before the day of the morning of the march, because she's the one who writes the memo and tells them ain't no women in the speakers. Where the women? Randolph was like, we can't even argue with her. So they get Daisy Bates. And she says, yeah, this ain't really enough. But all right, I'm gonna let it go for now. But she critiques these men. She said, look at this sexism. We have to deal with this. I guess that's why she called her a feminist. No, don't do that. Because Anna Hedgeman is not on your team. Anna Hedgeman on our team. And if you want to know what Anna Hedgeman thinks, the word feminist don't appear in either one of these books. So you just calm down. I understand y'all want solidarity, but we see the solidarity of all the white women who voted for Trump and who voted against Ossoff and Warner. So y'all work on yourself. Anyway, so she has a meeting the morning of a women's meeting. She says like 700 women come to the Mayflower Hotel. I want to have the keynote speaker this morning, Rosa Parks. So we see I Have a Dream, and she's actually sitting there. If you widen the shot out, you can see her sitting on the steps, and Arnold Hedgeman. But when's the last time either one of us, my sister, either one of us, Professor, read about, much less heard about, the big women's meeting they had before the march, and the one where Rosa Parks addressed all these women. Anna Hedgeman put this huge meeting, and then they walked on into the
day years old finding this out. Just today.
You see that?
Thank you.
You see that? I mean, and so for people listening to this, particularly young people, here's your homework. When you're in elementary school, when you're in middle school, you looking for somebody to write about, go get Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Not just the girls, the boys, everybody should be doing it. And of course now, so she ends, like I said, she ends the trumpet sound. She folds all that into here, and then the rest of this, yeah, you can say, me just put my timer on, so I don't do more than 5 minutes, because otherwise, this is really a teach. Remember when we had the session and the sister came on and she held the book up. She said, yes. I found a copy. This is a manual for thinking about and organizing Black people. She talks about the March on Washington in chapter 2, a suspended moment, where she says, I didn't know whether this coalition that came together to hear all these speeches would last or fracture. She said, the work really started after that. The girls get killed in Birmingham. Who is at the funeral? Anna Arnold Hedgeman. In the room with Martin Luther King, talking to him just before he goes and gives the eulogy. How does Anna Arnold Hedgeman fall out of history? She's not outside 16th Street listening to it on loudspeaker. She's in the church. And then the Civil Rights Act, she writes about that of 64. She helps get it passed. Then she says, now the work is to make it stand up. She's there. She then helps organize, along with Pauli Murray, another person we should talk about extensively, the National Organization of Women. I mean, she's in now. She's at the beginning of now. And then she devotes two final things. And I got the saying on the hourglass is going. She helps organize the Negro churchmen. Now, because the black people have kind of been ignored in the church, they've had conferences, but they want Martin Luther King to come talk about spirituality. No, we need to talk about the black church. So she gets Benjamin Mays, and then Benjamin Payton comes over to take over the Negro churchmen, and she helps organize them. She's not a minister, but she's a devout Christian. So she's kind of, that's why she's called a secular Christian. She helps them address the question of black power, because now by 66, black power is the thing. These young people talking about black power. So she goes and hangs out with some of the SNCC people. She's talking to Ella Baker, and she does not poo-poo black power here. She says, no, I understand what they're talking about, and we need to grapple with that. So the Negro churchmen come out with a position on black power that is supportive of the concept and says, you know, we have to move forward. It's Anna Hedgeman in that conversation. And then she talks about this. She says, and I'm just going to read from this. This is a chapter in this book. Let me see, chapter 6. Chapter 6, because what happens is that was one thing, the Negro churchmen. The other thing is they retire her. She's retired from the National Council of Churches. They say, you got to retire. 67 years old. Yeah, I'm in good health. Yeah, me and my husband, yeah, we're going to retire you. She said, okay. She's retired. She's 67. She lives to 90. What does Anna Hedgeman do? I see you. I'm starting something called the Hedgeman Consulting Group. She's a consultant for the next 23 years of her life. They put her out. She said, she writes about, I ain't got no money. Me and my husband basically took this Declaration of Independence. We said we're going to work for whatever I just expected to work till I died. Now I'm retired. I got a little Social Security pension. And remember now, she born before there is Social Security. She played a role in wanting to get Social Security. I got a little you know what? No problem. Consultant. She then goes on a tour of HBCUs and a tour of Black America to help establish Black Studies programs. She said, these young people got some of this Black. She said, I'm coming back to Black Studies now. I started with it. She helps put those curriculum in place. And she then even does a survey, which I want to be called Negro, Colored, African American. She comes to the determination of these three. I understand why different people want it based on generations, and see, young people want Black. They want everything Black. Me and my husband, after reading this survey and consulting this research that I did, we're gonna go with African American. Because now this is years before any Jesse of it. This is Anna Hedgeman writing it. So anyway, this is what she says at the end. She says, when I'm looking at the UN and the US and all the problems we have, she said, there's no immediate solution to these problems. She said, but there's no soil to kiss. That's why this chapter is called No Soil to Kiss. She said, those words were a flashback from my memory of a social worker's report of more than 30 years ago. She's writing in 1977. That report had detailed the story of newly arrived immigrants from Southern Europe who, in ecstasy over the meaning of the Statue of Liberty on bended knees, had stooped to kiss the soil at their feet. She says, but as I reflected as a Black person, as an African American in this society, I have no soil to kiss. She said, I born in Iowa, raised in Minnesota, all these white people, yeah, but I'm an American, but I have no soil to kiss. And people say, oh, well, you know, you're overstating it. Maybe she didn't say that. Okay, let me just show you. That's not chapter 6. No soil to kiss. You know, I want people very clear. I'm not exaggerating on it. Oh, and about the saying is almost out. Y'all can read about the rest of it, but I'm going to put this picture up there because I never showed you her picture. You assume she's probably the color of onyx, right? That's Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Anna Arnold Hedgeman didn't have to go through what she went through in a racist society where they take what you look like and try to act like that's how they had to treat you. She's what some people would call light skinned, but I don't use light skinned, dark skinned. Could she have passed for white? Maybe. In fact, the sand is out. So I do want to show a picture of her when she was younger though. And this book is good for that. See, when she's younger, she look a little different. There she go when she was at Hamlin. Yeah. You know, she got it. You know, I love those old school Black pictures. You don't see a lot of see, I wouldn't have been able to take a picture because I got too many teeth showing. This is her husband, Merritt. That's there. She got that stylish fly hat on. You can see her coming up in meetings, right? There they go right there. When they ended up in the same nursing home in New York City. And she is with A. Philip Randolph. She go with Randolph in front of the church. Look, oh yeah, here's a picture you see a lot. Here is Malcolm. You see that picture a lot. Sometimes you see A. Philip Randolph. Let me move my finger. They go Anna
there
Arnold
she
Hedgeman
is.
sitting there behind Negro and Puerto Rican communities. There they are with the strike stuff she helped organize. She's sitting behind Malcolm. I mean,
I love that you said, because our kids always get these projects in school, especially during Black History Month, Women's History Month. If everybody in this space directed their child to do a piece on Anna Arnold Hedgeman, and if we all went to social media and put the hashtag Anna Hedgeman up on the Twitters or the Facebook, wherever we are, just the hashtag, it would send a message, but also start to get people to be, to go down these rabbit holes and question, well, who is this woman? I think we have the power to shape what's coming in the future. And I want to thank you for making sure the next 100,000 years will not forget Anna Arnold Hedgeman. You did that today. You did that.
Well, put it this way. Let me say two very, very, very quick things. Number one, what you just said, the first thing you said, that is a true inspiration. In fact, yeah, it's like an idea went off. I'm gonna ask my students to do something this semester, because we started law school a little while ago. So this semester, yeah, I'm gonna ask my undergraduates. But what you just said, you know, when you say something like that, that thing comes to fruition. A hashtag like that and getting it, woo! You talk about a woman for the age. And the second thing is, I would just say very quickly, thank you for making this conversation possible, because she wrote these books and she lived in our lifetimes and has disappeared. So the idea that we can do this once, no. It's like the ancient Egyptians. When they would forget something, like the Shabaka stone, Shabaka went back 2,000 years, found the original theology of how the world came into existence and said, write it on granite, because we can't lose this again. What you're doing is helping us by writing again on the granite, because Anna Hedgeman, we don't know about her, but we can know about her. So thank you.
Well, we do today. Let me thank you. Let me thank everybody here. Spread this, get 5 more people in. We need this collective to be bigger and bigger and bigger. Dr. Carr, you are a national treasure. I love you.
You are a national treasure. I love you.